Thank you. And I hate to disappoint, I did not bring a picture of my childhood home. It's not zero carbon either. But what I'm going to talk about today is the idea of building support for Arctic renewable energy and other climate change mitigation options, and thinking about that from the perspective of behavioral science. So first, I'm going to try to convince you why we need behavioral science to inform this discussion. And then I'm just going to take a couple items out of behavioral science and discuss those briefly, and hopefully before I get kicked off the stage for going over time. So first of all, this is a beautiful vista of offshore wind energy. The problem is that it's going to be expensive. Right now, recent studies showed that it's going to require substantial subsidies. Once again, we have a lot of potential for distributed renewable generations, but that's also going to require some additional support in order to be competitive with fossil fuel technologies. And finally, to really scale up renewable energy in the Arctic, we're definitely going to need grid expansion and possibly energy storage to other costly solutions. So not to be too negative or anything, but we're going to need something in order to make these things competitive. We need a carbon price, government subsidies, or a higher willingness to pay for renewable energies. These are going to require a substantial commitment for climate change mitigation. So that's easy, right? All you do is we show people these graphs of how terrible the world will be if we do nothing, and they will just fork over the cash. No problem. Walk away. We're set. Right? Well, it's not quite that easy, or so it has seemed over the past number of decades that we've been working on this problem. We're starting to get people to take climate change seriously. It's being seen as a top priority in a number of countries across the world. We can talk about the United States later with their 40%. But there's still wide disparities in how much people are willing to pay to address climate change. So what does behavioral science have to say about this issue? Like, clearly we have this disconnect between the information, the weight of the problem, and the willingness to really step up and put forth the necessary resources for the solutions. And I just want to say that, first of all, we really need to stop and appreciate how complicated climate change is. It takes an extremely daunting cognitive effort just to wrap your head around the problem. And that makes it particularly conducive to issues that come up when we have limited information, limited cognitive capacity, limited time, and judging by the number of people checking their emails right now, limited attention. So as a result, we take a lot of shortcuts. We have biases, we use rule of thumb thinking, and we don't always optimize. So behavioral economics is working to try to figure out how to better connect people with the information and to better design policies that are going to help motivate people to take action or at least behave optimally. We've already seen from the other talks, sometimes optimal, we can discuss what's optimal and what's not, but we want to make sure that we can get us to that point once we have an idea of what we should be doing. So lesson number 2 is that framing matters. Frames are, you can think of a frame as an interpretive storyline that set a specific train of thought into motion. And it's communicating why something might be a problem. People are going to make vastly different decisions depending on how a situation is framed. Now, here's a couple different frames that we can use to connect more people to the problems of climate change and the solutions. The economic development frame has been very popularly used in the past couple of years and seems to be effective. Technology development, nostalgia, think about never having a white Christmas again. That appeals to people, and they can feel that in a way that they have trouble connecting with graphs and numbers. Private property is a good way of thinking of appealing to a more conservative mindset. And also thinking about safety and insurance. So people have a diverse set of experiences and viewpoints, so we should expect a diverse response to the same information. It's not enough to simply put your research out there and expect it to be understood and incorporated into people's behavior. So the third lesson I want to draw from behavioral science is the idea of time inconsistency and hyperbolic discounting. So in climate models, when we're trying to inform how big of a carbon tax we should have, or which policy options are viable, or how much we should really be doing, the social cost of carbon is extremely sensitive to the discount rate used in the analytical model. And the disagreement over whether that rate should be 3% or 5% or even 7%, 1%, 0%, leads to huge ranges of estimates in the social cost of carbon. This adds to the uncertainty and kind of provides fuel for the fire of people who want to delay action due to uncertainty, whether for legitimate or less legitimate reasons. So behavioral science suggests a different approach. So we'll do a quick audience participation here. Would you rather have $10 in cash right now, or would you rather have $15 next week? Who says $10 right now? Oh, you guys are very savers. $15 next week? Wow, man, this is a different crowd, because I'll tell you, the studies that have been done have shown that to be very flipped. So you guys are all very future-minded. I guess it's not that surprising. So if you said $10 today, then you're exhibiting a high discount rate. Would you rather have $10 in 5 weeks or $15 in 6 weeks? Who would rather have $10 in 5 weeks? $15 in 6 weeks? Okay, so even though you guys are very future-minded, we saw some switches from the first scenario to the second scenario. If we had a constant discount rate, we wouldn't see that switching. So we're showing time inconsistency. What that leads us to is the idea of hyperbolic discounting. It captures this inconsistency, and it's more appropriate for long-term problems. So immediate benefits are still more valuable than benefits in the future under hyperbolic discounting. Here we have the blue line represents hyperbolic discounting. And we have the green line is just your regular exponential or compound discounting. And benefits don't decay so quickly to zero. So basically with hyperbolic discounting, it better represents the idea that we still can care about the far future, even if we care a little bit more about what happens today than what happens tomorrow. So this has a huge impact on the estimates of social cost of carbon, which is something we should care about when we're thinking about communicating the level of uncertainty and the level of action we should be taking today versus tomorrow. And I've got my concluding thoughts right in time, almost. So in conclusion, with our current technology, renewable energy is going to require some additional public support. Hopefully we'll see the sort of technological developments that are going to bring down those costs in short order, and it'll soon be cost competitive with fossil fuel technologies. But in the meantime, we're probably going to require some subsidies or a carbon tax. Now, in order to build public support to pay these higher prices, we need to understand how people are actually processing the information that we're giving them about climate change and using that information to make their decisions, whether it's whether to install more energy efficient technology or whether it's to vote for the guy who's saying that we want to put wind power as a top priority. And I think that we can take lessons away as practitioners and policymakers. We can already incorporate the many things in behavioral science that helps us behave or helps us build better policies or communicate better with our constituents. And additionally, much more research is needed to understand how to apply these concepts to climate change and renewable energy. I hope to be generating some of that research in the future, and I hope to get some collaboration from people in this room on these very important questions. Thank you.